Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. How's it all going? Um Today I really just want to talk about just some of my favorite things in horror. Halloween's coming up pretty soon and I had some videos planned, but they were more long form stuff and they weren't really working out because I'm not uh used to that kind of stuff. But be patient. I think you're going to like it. And now that that chill's out of the way, I really just want to talk about some horror stuff I really like. Um, Originally, when I pressed record, I was only going to talk about Resident Evil, but then I got to thinking, like, there's just so much more to horror that I love. Uh, so I'm going to start with Resident Evil and then just kind of go off from there. Resident Evil has been a part of my life since I was a kid. Watching my uncle play Resident Evil 4 and like the OG, not the OG Resident Evil, but the 2002 remake, which is one of my favorite games of all time. Um, Resident Evil's always been like a big part of my life. I love Resident Evil. I've consumed so much Resident Evil media, from some manga to most of the mainline games. I've played all except Zero. I think Zero's the only one I haven't played. Um, I've even played Code Veronica. Uh, yeah, it's just a really good horror series. Um, it means a lot to me personally because it's so unique among horror. At least it was for the time, right? 'Cause, like, yeah, sure, it's zombies and all that, but the idea of like, oh, the zombies come from like a pharmaceutical virus, like this evil fucking pharmaceutical company Umbrella, and it just, I don't know, it created such an interesting thing for me that I hadn't seen before at the time. Then again, I was like 6, if even. Um, but it just felt interesting. It felt like I wanted to, play more and more and more. And I've gotten that more. I played most of the series, old and new, and while it definitely has its hiccups, it's special to me. From the different viruses to Wesker being probably one of my favorite just campy villains of all time. I actively listened to uh that one video where it's Chris, it's like from the perspective of Chris Redfield, and it's like singing over uh the One Piece pirate rap, but it's just him wanting Ethan to fuck Claire. It's the greatest thing. Uh, but yeah, it's Resident Evil's great, and obviously I don't have to say that it's great. It's like the most popular horror franchise in video games. But to transition that a little bit, I know that that was basically just like a fan rant, being like, "I like it a lot," and like not really explaining why this video is gonna be so bad. Um, but transition that to a little bit to some more indie horror. I think is pretty neat. I'm gonna pull my Steam library here real quick because there's a few of them that I think are neat. Um, I An easy one to try and mention because this one's been hitting popularity. Is Fear and Hunger. Fear and Hunger is really cool. It's fucking terrifying though. Fear and Hunger makes me stressed. There's hardly anything quite like it. Um, because it hits you with reality so hard that it's a little jarring because you can play like other RPG Maker games, even horror based RPG Maker games, and they'll be neat, but they don't really hit the same way Fear and Hunger does, and it's really disturbing. And I honestly, it put me off from playing it for a bit. Like I have both games. I have both Fear and Hunger and Fear and Hunger Termina, but it feels hard to play because it feels like I actually have to face like demons in both the physical sense and in the more psychological sense. But to tune that down a little bit, I kind of want to touch on Omori. I don't want to too much because of the whole thing with Omocat. Uh, but what they made, Omori, uh, really fun game. I never got around to finishing it. I own it twice over. I got it on Switch. I even pre-ordered it on Switch. This was before the whole allegation thing. Um, and I have owned it on Steam. I've just never gotten around to finishing it. One day I will, but it adds a really good blend of horror into like a RPG style in a very different way from Fear and Hunger. As I feel like these two are really comparable uh, in how they are. Sorry, it's squeaking my chair. Uh, because both of them are RPGs made in RPG Maker, but they approach horror very differently. For Mori, it's part of me wants to say it's a little more that's Silent Hill esque psychological horror. Like it's less tangible. Uh, like Silent Hill is all about psychological horror, and Mori feels more like that. Meanwhile, uh, I was gonna say that Fear and Hunger feels a bit more like Resident Evil, but it's more Eldritch horror, honestly. Because I want to say, because there are monsters. There are monsters you can interact with. Well, even though they're disturbing, they're still creatures. So it's kind of like Resident Evil in that sense, but it's definitely more Eldritch. Uh, Another thing that has a bit of horror in it. It's not really a horror game, but damn, One Shot. I need to make a whole video on that because I love One Shot, but it's got some really interesting horror bits that kind of like are really unsettling. Like if you play the original version of One Shot, like the actual bit where it's like if you close the game, fucking Nico dies. Like that shit haunts me. Like, to this day, like hearing like the howling uh whistle with like the broken light bulb haunts me. There's a bit further in that I don't want to get into because honestly, everyone should play One Shot. It's so good. Please, Nico is my lovely child. But it gives you like a perfect bit of anxiety, like a good horror thing would. Um, to go even more niche than One Shot and Amori, um, there's this game that I played, which was called Close Your Eyes. If that name sounds familiar, uh, it's not the one where you have to like close your eyes to ignore monsters and all that. That Matt Pat did a video on. There is a game called Close Your Eyes that Game Theory did a video on, but it's not that game. It is a RPG Maker game by I unfortunately can't remember the name. I don't know the name of the creator. I'll put it up on screen right now. But it was a really good horror game and a really interesting story. And I can just always hear the announcer, because there's an announcer, you're like a little marshmallow guy trying to escape. Um, ju- uh, there's a point where his voice just not distorts, but it goes lower and lower. And it's just really interesting because he's like, "Oh yeah, close your eyes," and then he just goes, "Close your eyes," and then just cuts back to him going, "Just for a little bit, you know." And I constantly do his voice all the time. Honestly, I love the announcer. Great guy. I want a marshmallow plushie because I love that game. I've played it a bunch. I play it like at least once a year. Not necessarily always during Halloween time. Sometimes I'll just be in the mood to play it and I'll run through it. It's not a long game. I think there was a remaster of it that I need to purchase. Um, but it's good. I like it. Um, and the last thing I want to talk about, uh, or horror game wise, because I do want to touch on a little bit of horror movies, because those, while those aren't as integral in my life as horror games, I do love a lot of horror movies. Um, and they have some stories on those. Evil Within. So, Evil Within, made by Shinji Mikami and the people at Tango Gameworks. Uh, and if Shinji Mikami sounds familiar, he's the guy who made Resident Evil. Made a series called Evil Within. Great games. They're not really the scariest, but oh my god, in terms of survival horror, it felt good, especially the second game. Like, the a YouTuber called NitroRad did a really good video on the duology, and I would love to cover them someday because I love the Evil Within duology to death. Evil Within 2 especially just feels like a really good game to play. Like it feels like survival horror. It feels like I'm surviving. Um but they're really special like from the concept is feels like a few generic things mixed together. It's like a beat jaded cop who lost his family. But then like they threw like a psychological twist, like, oh yeah, he's in this mind world that's controlled by this crazy once doctor, and there's a twist to that too. And then they never follow up on the twist in the second game, which kind of sucks. Um, but to anyone who hasn't played Evil Within, highly recommend it. To switch it over to movies a little bit before I wrap things up. Um, some of my favorite horror movies are a lot of the classics. I like Nightmare on Elm Street. I like Friday the 13th. For as bad as it is, Freddy vs. Jason is a movie I used to watch a lot. Um, I can't really tell you why. Uh, but when I was a kid, I used to love watching Freddy vs. Jason. Just seeing two horror icons go at it is neat, which is funny because I don't like Dead by Daylight, which is just like a bunch of horror icons going and killing people. Uh, Jason X is another movie. So I just used to watch really fucking bad movies. I used to watch Spaceballs a lot. That's not horror, but just to like mention like really like shitty movies. But Spaceballs is goated. Uh, let's see what else. What else? I really like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like the very first one. That one is amazing cinema. You If you haven't watched that, you deserve to see a movie of a horror movie of that quality. It's so good. It's great. Um but yeah, that's all I can really think of at this moment in time. This kind of turned from a like a things I love to like an advertisement for other things I love. It's like watch this, play this, please play this, please watch this, please play this. Um, especially for the games. I fucking just rambled about the movies, but I'm more of a gamer at heart, anyways. So what you gonna do? Yeah. If you're interested, check out all the different stuff. And thanks for watching. Put down some of your favorite horror stuff in the comments below. I love uh, horror and I want to experience more of it. So please give me some more stuff to read, watch, play, anything. And thank you. Happy Halloween.